Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And in today's episode, I'm going to be listing out my three biggest concerns for the postseason for your Philadelphia Phillies, and a lot more on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of my other work in the sports talk space here in Philadelphia. I've been over on the radio talking sports in 97.5 The Fanatic for 5 years. This is my third year as a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member, and it's my third year as the host of Locked On Phillies right here, yours truly. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoy the program, please make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube. That'll get you notifications when new episodes are posted. It's also the number one way to help us out here on Locked On Phillies if you enjoy the content. Today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.comThe, the right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. The Phillies, well, they're not going anywhere. They're hanging out. They have the week off. We're going to talk about the three biggest concerns that they should have about October, or rather the fan base should have about them. Also, we're going to get into a little bit of conversation about the wild card series with the Mets taking a 1-0 lead over the Brewers, and the Phillies start intra-squad games. So we'll discuss what Dave Dombrowski had to say about that. He had some interesting stuff to say in general. But the three biggest October concerns is where I wanted to start today's episode, because to me, I think that there is a little bit of trepidation with the fan base, and a lot of it stems from the past two seasons. What went wrong against the Diamondbacks? What went wrong against the Astros? And we're going to go in reverse order. So we're going to go 3-1, one being the highest, most concern. Not great wording there by me, but for the Philadelphia Phillies in October. And I'm going to have reasons why I feel these ways, but also reasons to refute that they're a possible issue not a possible issue, but a probable issue for the Philadelphia Phillies. So the number three biggest concern in October is going to be Ranger Suarez. Now, part of the reason why he's lower on the list than some of the other concerns is because he's probably your third or fourth starter. And also, he's shown in the past times where he has not pitched all that well, and then he gets in the postseason, and he's a big-time performer. We'll see if that stays true, but you also have Wheeler, Nola, and Christopher Sanchez has been throwing really well. And we know that Suarez's playoff track record in smaller spurts is pretty darn good. We thought this was going to be the year where you could throw him out there and say, go 6, go get us a game. But if he's got to go get you 3 again in an NLDS type of game like he did against the Braves last year, and then you bullpen the rest of it, you can do that because the bullpen is that talented. The problem with Ranger Suarez is his arm might be dead. You might be in a situation where he just doesn't have it right now. There's an injury. He's thrown more this season than he has in any other season in his career, so maybe it could just be wearing down of the arm. But after seeing his final start in Washington where he gave up 6 runs, a very valid concern. Ranger Suarez is not at his best. This team ceiling is a lot higher when you have 4 elite starting pitchers compared to when you have 3 and a question mark. The thing with the question mark is it's not a definitive Ranger Suarez is not going to get the job done in the postseason. We have more concerns than we thought we were going to have about Ranger Suarez. You still have 3 really good pitchers. And if Ranger Suarez can figure it out, well, that wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world considering his track record. So I'm not hitching my wagon to Ranger Suarez right now, but I'm not unhitching it either. We may end up just standing in place, but bottom line is this. There should be a healthy level of questioning about Ranger Suarez's status going into October. It's not as big of a problem as some of the other things that we're going to get into, though. My number 2 biggest concern about October is the manager. And I love Rob Thompson. I do. I think he's an exceptional manager. I think he did an incredible job of delivering a healthy team to the postseason this year. And you saw so many teams around baseball with major injuries, guys missing here, guys missing there. not getting the production you want out of certain players. Not only did Rob Thompson get the Phillies to the 6th highest win total in franchise history, they won their division, but he delivered a healthy starting lineup and rotation to the postseason. Not to mention a healthy bullpen as well. He gave the right amount of rest to players. He gave the right amount of playing time to the bench guys. You feel really darn good about where this team is health-wise because of Rob Thompson. So that's his flowers, right? But here's where the reservations creep in. In the past couple seasons, you've seen postseason series decided in a negative way on the decisions of Rob Thompson to some extent. Now, the Houston Astros series, there were chances to win that, pulling Zach Wheeler where he did and letting Jose Alvarado face Jordan Alvarez. I thought that was an awful decision at the time. I will die on that hill. Bad call. In the the Astros were probably still the better team. The Arizona Diamondback series, you're looking at a situation where throwing Craig Kimbrell in Game 4 was didn't look all that smart. Put you behind the 8 ball. Now, what I will say, if I'm Rob Thompson, is, hey, man, I delivered my team a chance to win 1 of 2 games at home at Citizens Bank Park with the series on the line to go to the World Series. My guy's got a hit. And he'd be absolutely right. Now, he'd never say that because he never throw his boys under the bus. But the decisions by Rob Thompson, while they have negatively affected series at points, they're not the deciding factor in the series, I don't think. They're just things that have caused people to have a little bit less faith in Rob Thompson. And bullpen management is not his strongest suit. I don't think he's awful at it, like some people will say. But I don't think he's like the greatest bullpen wizard mind of all time. Like, I do think there are times where he looks at situations and he does not handle the pitching staff the correct way. But these are one-offs. The problem is if you have a one-off in October, you could be going home. Ball bounces one way, you make one bad pitch, one bad decision. It can make the difference in the series, and it can make the difference in the season. So I think that concern about Rob Thompson's ability, because this is something Ranger Suarez is, if he starts, when he starts, worry about that. Rob Thompson's decision-making is every game. Now, he can be brilliant. We talked about Ranger Suarez in that 3-inning start against the Braves in the NLDS and then bullpen game the rest of the way. And Rob Thompson was a mastermind with how he handled his bullpen in that game and the strategy that led into it. I think he's very, very good. But I do think there's a valid level of questioning of like when the lights get brightest, when you get to a point where you have to, like, your decisions are going to be amplified a millionfold. Well, 2 years in a row, he's kind of made questionable decisions in series that have sent you home. That's something that I think is fair to worry about, but the hope is that your bullpen is talented enough that, well, it should be pretty simple to get through this, right? It doesn't mean you're going to simply win. It just means that you're going to be in a position where most of the buttons you have a chance to push are the right ones. Hoffman, Strom, Alvarado, Kerkering, Estevez, those guys are all quality bullpen arms. You got them all healthy and at your disposal to use however you would like. So Topper's got what he needs. I would just be lying to you if I said I was like 100% confident in his ability to manage it perfectly. But nobody's perfect. You just have to be good enough. That brings us to our final and the top one. So the third was Ranger Suarez. The second was Rob Thompson's bullpen management. But the number one October concern, everybody say it all at once, because we know where this was going the whole time. There was no doubt that we were going to discuss the offensive slump that could be coming. But here's the thing, folks. It could be coming for any team. It could be coming for the Dodgers, the Padres, the Mets, the Brewers, the Braves, the whoever on the National League or the American League side, the Yankees, Guardians, Orioles, Royals, Tigers, or Astros. Any of these teams in the postseason can just go into a complete dumpster fire dive of offensive lack of production, because you know what that is. If you can see what's in my hand right now, if you're watching on YouTube, it's a baseball. That's baseball, folks. Sometimes you just hit one of those cold stretches. Every team does for a couple games here or a couple games there over the course of 162. And if those games come in the NLCS or NLDS or World Series, well, tough luck, you're going home. That sucks. Now, are there certain things you can do to avoid against that? Absolutely. And it's by simplifying your approach and trying to stay within yourself and not try and do too much. And what people talk about so often with the Philadelphia Phillies struggles in the past, their offense going cold in big spots, I think is missing a very important part of the equation. Normally, the problems that kill you are the ones you don't plan for. They're the ones you didn't expect. the issues that pop up that say, wow, we did not see that coming. We were not prepared for that. If you're the Philadelphia Phillies, do you think you're prepared for a situation where your offense slumps? Do you think the guys have been thinking about it? Do you think the manager has been planning for it? Do you think the GM and the president of baseball operations have built this team to try and avoid it as much as they can? Do you think the owner stays up at night thinking about what could happen if that happens? And do you think the players have forgotten about last year? Because they certainly have not. Part of that conversation of your offense goes quiet 2 years in a row makes the players say, hey, that ain't happening again. They're so focused on it not happening. They're thinking about how to avoid it. It's a good thing, and that's what playoff experience does, right? Playoff experience teaches you where your weaknesses are, where your potential pitfalls are, but it doesn't mean that they're covered up. This team went through like a 2-month-long slump, and they are a boom or bust offense at times. And what you need to happen is just simply, right, a couple guys have to be going at all times. It doesn't have to be the whole lineup. It doesn't have to be all the stars. It just has to be like, I don't know, 2 stars and a role player at any given time need to be having solid games. So one game it could be Harper, Castellanos, Brandon Marsh. Perfect. You can get a job done on that. Next game it could be Turner and Bohm and Johan Rojas. Great. You can get a game one on that. It doesn't have to be the entire lineup putting up 17, 18 hits in a game. It just has to not be what happened last year where everybody fell apart, besides probably Brandon Marsh, honestly. But that cannot happen. And when the team starts to hit their little slide that every team does at points in the long postseason run, we hope the Phillies have a long postseason run. It's on the manager to maybe make adjustments to the lineup that he didn't make last year, and that goes back to number 2. But the number one concern that I have heading into October, and I think the fan base has as well, will they go into another slump? And if they do, well, it's kind of that unstoppable issue where you can't win if you don't score. If the Phillies aren't scoring, they're going home. That's why it will always be my number one concern until they prove that they are capable of avoiding that as a narrative in the postseason. But I don't mean to scare you. I gave you positives on all of those things, and I also gave you reasons why they could overcome those problems if they do end up becoming bigger issues. Coming up next, we're going to talk about Game 1 of the NL Wildcard Series between the Mets and the Brewers, and why a divisional opponent in the Mets, well, they got one game closer to facing the Phillies. And should we be worried about it? We'll discuss as we continue Locked On Phillies. But I'd like to talk to you about FanDuel first, because FanDuel is America's number one sportsbook, and this is a great time for sports and sports gambling. So the NFL's rolling. We know that. There's a lot of opportunities to bet on football, but not just professional. No, you got college football. Oh, by the way, we've been talking about what? The baseball playoffs are ongoing. And you have hockey and basketball starting later this month. It's a beautiful time for sports, folks. And there's no better place to bet on the games than FanDuel. They have a whole bunch of great props and parlays and teasers and different promotions to set you up with exactly what you need in their app. It's all encompassing. It's got everything you need. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you don't just want to go and place your live bet. No, you want a place where you can go check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and do so much more while you're placing your bets. And FanDuel does that for you. Plus, you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet as a new FanDuel customer. Again, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So what are you waiting for? It's a great time of the year for sports gambling. So you want to go ahead and check out FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app, America's number one sportsbook. Let's talk about Prize Picks next, okay? Because daily fantasy sports is a great way to make every game interesting. And Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has more daily fantasy sports, or has made, I should say, daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You should pick more or less on at least 2 players. That's it. 2 players. Simple. For a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks, and you can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks as well. You could take some easy ones, like, well, Bryce Harper's going to get it? Absolutely. Sure. Why not? He shows up for the postseason. You add that in with, like, Zach Wheeler strikeouts and maybe a Kyle Schwarber more than on hits, and you're feeling darn good about where you are right there. It's super easy to make money. And Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas, all the big ones. You've got a lot of great opportunity with Prize Picks. So you got to go ahead and check it out. I mean, download the app today. Use code Locked On MLB, and they'll even get you $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, if you download the Prize Picks app today and use code Locked On MLB, you'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks is absolutely the best. I don't know what you're waiting for. You want to get in on the action? Well, go ahead and use Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, let's talk about a potential divisional series opponent being a divisional opponent. The New York Mets took a 1-0 lead over the Milwaukee Brewers yesterday in the wild card series between those two teams that will determine who the Philadelphia Phillies play. It was an 8-4 victory. By the way, while we're on the topic, I'm going to take Prize Picks off the screen there if you're watching on YouTube. While we're on the topic, we have the game times for this weekend's NLDS game. So Saturday and Sunday, the Phillies will play at Citizens Bank Park against either the Mets or the Brewers. The time for both games is at 4:08 p.m., which honestly, perfect timing, right? You get to have a day before. You can go out, you can get brunch, a little lunch, take it easy. You don't have to wake up early. Get down there, tailgate if you're going to the games, chill on out. You're not rushing to get to the game or where you're going to watch the game at, but then should be done by like 7:30 at the latest. And you have the whole night ahead of you on Saturday or Sunday if you're like me and you got work early in the morning. You can get to bed. You can catch Sunday Night Football. This is just like 4:08 is a great time for a playoff baseball game. It'll get dark near the end, so it does feel like it's not one of those like sleepy little day games that always suck in the postseason because you feel like the juice isn't there for them. No, I love the fact that the Phillies have the 4:08 game time for both Saturday and Sunday against whoever comes out of the Mets-Brewers series. But yeah, the Mets take a 1-0 lead, and they looked pretty solid. They got down early. Luis Severino gave up some runs early, but then they battled back to make it 3-2, and then they extended it, and they ended up winning 8-4. The Mets, you look at, they only had 7 hits and scored 8 runs, so it was not as much of an offensive onslaught as you'd expect. In fact, the Mets only scored in 2 innings. They scored 3 in the second and 5 in the fifth. And after that, they didn't really score. Just the bullpen did a really good job of shutting down the Brewers' offense. And the Brewers have had offensive slumping issues at points this year. And they just didn't get the best pitching out of their guys, which pitching in October matters infinitely more than anything else, right? That is the number one thing you have to get right. You have to be able to pitch the baseball if you're going to be a World Series champion. And the Mets, well, I don't think they pitched all that amazing. They gave up 8 hits and 4 runs. If that's let's just transfer that, right? Let's say the Mets go out there in game 1. They win the series. They play the Philadelphia Phillies. And in game 1 in the NLDS, they give up 8 hits and 4 runs. They're losing that game because you know who's on the mound for you. Zach Wheeler is going out there, and he's going to absolutely shove. So I don't know. I'm not too worried about that performance by the Mets. I didn't see anything that scared me. I'm like, oh no, not the Mets. They're playing such good baseball. They're a good baseball team, and they have this weird magic about them that, bro, it is scary. Honestly, I don't look at the Mets as hey, they have this player, that player. Outside of Lindor and maybe a little bit of Pete Alonso, I don't look at them and say that's a player I'm worried about. Lindor, I'm terrified of, but he's a monster. But when I look at that team, it's just the feel of, they just keep winning. And they have a fan base that feels like they believe in what the team is doing right now. And for a much maligned fan base like the New York Mets, who've had so many years of there's no way we can get this done, it's nice for them to believe in something from their perspective. But I know from our perspective, because we've been that team before, the second that you're given a reason not to believe, that's when it all comes crashing down. They will fall quicker than anybody. Not the players necessarily, but the fan base. As soon as they get the nail-biting feeling of, man, the Phillies, they just scored 3 that inning, they're going to soil themselves. It'll be quiet up there at Citi Field when you get up there, if you get up there. And remember, the Brewers are not out of this yet. I still think the Brewers are a very quality team that have a great chance of winning this series. These games are right in Milwaukee, so the Mets would have to win 2 more on the road. What the number one goal for the Phillies should be is to have these teams play 2 more games so that they don't get 2 off days and set up their rotation the way they want for the NLDS. You play 2 more games, You make them play Thursday, and then they have the off day Friday for the travel day, but only that, and you don't really get to set anything up too much. That's the ideal thing. If the Mets win in 2, well, that makes it a little bit easier for them to rest up and get into a spot where they're ready to play the Phillies. And I'm not looking forward to that being the possibility. Is there any worry about potentially facing the Mets? We kind of went through this on yesterday's episode. But yes, there is. They're a divisional opponent that knows you well, that's motivated, that believes they can beat you because they just did in the most recent series between these two teams. And while all those games were up at Citi Field, they played you pretty tight this year. They seem to have this confidence that they can hang with you. And you have that more with divisional teams. We've seen it with the Phillies and the Braves. So I don't even really look at this as a X's and O's type of thing. I look at it more as of a momentum and familiarity type of thing. The Phillies are the better team than the New York Mets. And on paper, they should smoke them. But in reality, it's a thing. And the Phillies also, you have that first round bye week off thing that we're all started to worry about. So with all those things considered, there should be a healthy amount of respect for the Mets if they come out, and that divisional opponent adds a little wrinkle to it. But I can't lie. I said the number 1 team I'd want the Phillies to play is the Arizona Diamondbacks. The number 2 team would be the New York Mets. And guess what? The Diamondbacks didn't make the postseason. The Mets are in, and it looks like they've got a good chance of being the team that comes out to play in the divisional series. So, hey, I asked for it. Let's roll. If that is the opponent, let's go. We're ready for it. And the Philadelphia Phillies players are ready for it. Familiarity goes both ways, folks. The Phillies are familiar with them too. But speaking of that week off, what have the Phillies been doing? Well, Dave Dombrowski talked to media yesterday and gave us a little bit of insight on what exactly has been going on with the Phillies as they prepare for their series against whoever it's going to be. So we'll discuss it coming up as we wrap up today's episode. Let's talk about Booking.com. Booking.yeah. It's the absolute best. You get to explore those U.S. cities you always secretly wanted to learn more about. Other baseball cities. You could be looking at a series against the New York Mets. Maybe you want to go up there to Citi Field. There's worry about the Mets fans coming down here taking over Citizens Bank Park. I wouldn't do that if I was the Mets fans because Red October, it's a tough time here in Philadelphia. Don't even try it. It's not going to go well for you. But you want to go up there and take over Citi Field? Hey, why not? Go ahead and buy some tickets to the games, book some places up in New York, and explore the city. Booking.com can help you with that. I mean, the right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. With Booking.com, here's what you need to do. You just need to go to the website, obviously, Booking.com, or download the app on the App Store or the Google Play Store. And they'll set you up. They'll give you the best deals. They'll do all the research you need for you. They'll take care of everything for you when it comes to putting together your dream vacation, whether it surrounds the Phillies or not. It doesn't have to be baseball related, but this time of year, if you're watching Locked On Phillies, it probably would be. So go ahead and check them out. I'll use their slogan one more time because I just love it so much. Pick your perfect vacation, even if it is your rival city, with Booking.com, Booking.yeah. All right, let's discuss what the Phillies have been up to because they're doing intra-squad games. Now, I never understood. This is a stupid aside, but I just have to put it up there because if you're a baseball player, we're a baseball player, any type of sport where you played something, you might have called them scrimmages, but I never knew if it was inter-squad or intra-squad. Intra-squad is what I've seen it called, so whatever. But bottom line is, the Phillies here's the setup as Dave Dombrowski explained it. They have named captains. They were picking teams. So they were drafting teams and they played yesterday. It sounds like there was a wager on the games, by the way, which you can bet on the intra-squad games. It's not like betting on baseball with a sports book. It's not the same thing, but it's like, hey, this team's going to win, put a little extra juice on there. Some people were saying, I wish the Philadelphia Phillies would have allowed fans to come in to watch the games, to add that crowd noise and everything like that. I'm anti that because, frankly, and I love you. I love you, Philadelphia fans. I do. I'm one of you. I know how we are. You need to have a little bit of self-awareness here. We're not the most calm and rational fan base. And I know people are going to go and say, hey, well, you can donate the money to charity and get in there and get them to used to the crowd and everything. The Phils are used to having a crowd. You sold out a bunch of games this year. There were like 46 some sellouts or whatever. They're used to the bank being packed. They did it last year. They did it the year before. A lot of the same guys are on the team from those years. But what happens if you go out there and like they get one of the sides with Bryce Harper or Kyle Schwarber and Bryson Stott and Brandon Marsh? They get like one hit and nobody looks good, and the fan base sees that. There's going to be panic. Like I would rather when you have the open practices, when you have the games that you get to watch, spring training. Now preparing for the postseason, screw that. I'm not letting anyone in to see it. Close the bank, take care of your business. Don't focus on anything else. You're going to be used to the crowd noise. I'm not worried about that. You're playing home games for the first 2 games of the series. Just go out there and get your work done. Now, I think this is great. Off day Monday, inter squad on Tuesday. I don't know exactly what they're doing today. It may be a day off, then an inter squad on Thursday, and then the day off Friday, and then play Saturday. That's what I talked about on yesterday's episode. So I think that's the perfect type of schedule. I think this is the right way to attack it, right? Split the team up, play 9v9, just like you always do. Get a bunch of guys some work, but not in an environment where anyone's going to try and hurt anybody, not in an environment where anyone's playing hero ball, not in an environment where you're bringing in minor league arms to potentially throw and don't have control of what they're doing or whatever. No, this is kind of how you want this to work, and just get some light work in, stay loose, stay zoned in on live pitching, and just go ahead and get the work in that you need to. Dave Dombrowski talked about that and a bunch of stuff. And he also talked about the worries with October. He says, man, it's nerve-wracking. Like a ball bounces one way or one decision or one bloop hit, and next thing you know, series change, season's over, you're going home. And my response to that when we talked about it on the radio this morning was, yeah, that's why postseason baseball is absolutely miserable. And I hope you enjoy it more than I do, but I hate postseason baseball. I'm sorry. It bothers the heck out of me. And there's nothing you can do. It's just because you've put so much time and effort into 162 games worth of this, and one bounce of the baseball the wrong way, and it's over. It's squat. It's such a long Imagine this, right? This is what the baseball season is. You run a marathon, 26.2 miles. You're sprinting the whole way. Tired when you get to the end. You put all your effort into that, and you run through that tape at the end, and you say, yes, I completed the marathon. Oh, not to mention, if you're the Phillies, I completed the marathon in second place. That's pretty darn good, right? And then they say, okay, here's a dart. You get one throw at this dartboard, and if you don't hit the bullseye, you're done. It's just such this minimal thing compared to the regular season, and every pitch is pure agony because it's not like football where you see a team driving down the field and okay, they're at the 40. Now they're in field goal range. They're at the 20. Now they might start throwing to the end zone. They're at the goal line. Well, they're probably going to score here. It's not like basketball where it's just back and forth. Any team can make a run at any time, but there's this constant feel of scoring. It's most similar to hockey in that, but even hockey, if the puck's not on your end of the ice, you feel comfortable. Well, in baseball, any pitch can change the entire feel of the game. Any pitch. You leave one over the middle, bang, run, which is hard to come by in the postseason. And the next thing you know, everything feels different. So it's a stress ball of anxiety for 3 hours. And then you just go and do it all over again. You do it for another series and then the World Series. And that's why I say it's miserable. Now, it's incredible theater, but it's just so nerve-wracking as a fan or as someone rooting for this team or someone covering this team that wants the success to happen for the Philadelphia Phillies so bad. I'm a fan first. I lose my mind over this team. And that's why I feel what Dave Dombrowski is saying with the nerve-wracking nature of postseason baseball. It also reminds you how thin the margin for error is. Could you imagine if, in the NFL, you missed one tackle, one player missed one tackle, and it's just bang, 7 points, game change. If you do, there's another guy to pick it up. But there's so much riding on every pitch of the baseball that you need to make sure you're as sharp as possible. I think the Phillies are doing everything they can to do that. These intra-squad games are setting them up to be warm enough, but not so hot that they burn themselves out ahead of Saturday's matchup with whoever it's going to be. Right now, it looks like the Mets with that 1-0 lead. They've got good pitching. Everyone's rested. The bullpen feels good. The position players are healthy. The manager seems to be zoned in on what his team needs. The president of baseball operations has done his part to put together a good roster along with GM Sam Fold. Always like to give him credit. A lot of people pretend like he doesn't exist because Dave Dombrowski is such a big name, but this team has gone through a lot, and they've come out on the other side with stupendous marks based on what they've done to this point. Every day we draw closer, though, the anxiety ramps up, the focus ramps up, the whole, wow, this is like the part of the roller coaster ride where you're just click, 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 climbing the mountain, and you can see the drop coming, and you're like, okay, well, we might feel like we're chilling right now, but every time, every foot you move up, you're another step closer to the drop or the ride of your life. Let's hope it's the latter for this Red October. That's all for today's episode. Thank you so much for checking us out. Please also check out Locked On MLB, the Locked On MLB podcast hosted by Paul Francis Sullivan. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just covers baseball in general, so a little bit more overarching view. Some big stuff going on with the postseason right now. The Tigers took down the Astros, miracle run by them in Game 1. A lot of other series late night. The Padres taking down the Braves. There's a lot of good games going on right now that are not directly affecting who the Phillies play next. So check that out with Sully. Make that your next listen. And please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff for us here on Locked On Phillies. We're another day closer. Tomorrow, I'll talk to you on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.